This is the butterfly effect, which sees Harry Redknapp in 1996 potentially resulting in Mason Mount joining Manchester United 27 years later. This whole situation is just, come on, but let's delve into it. There's a reason footballing managers are in the position they're in, and football fans are just fans. Nothing proves this more than Harry Redknapp in 1996. Redknapp always knew Frank Lampard possessed enormous talent, so in 1996, when a fan questioned Lampard's appearances in the West Ham team, doubting his ability during a fans forum, the legendary manager hit back. At just 17 years of age, the young player had the pressure of the world on his shoulders. Not only did he have the stress of the ever-increasing number of people watching the Premier League matches on Sky Sports at the time, but he also had to cope with the pressure of playing at Upton Park. His manager at the time, Harry Redknapp, always backed the young midfielder, who was in fact his nephew, so regularly fought his corner, which I'm sure many West Ham players and fans at the time had a problem with, which is fairly understandable. And during a fans forum in 1996, the pair sat together to take questions from the crowd, when one member of the audience asked, "I want to ask Harry if the publicity that he's given young Frank there warrants it."
Personally, I don't think he's quite good enough yet.
He is good enough, and he definitely will be good enough, because young Frank's 17 or 18 and is miles in front of him.
Well, that ain't really true.
That is true, you know, that's my opinion, and that's what I get paid to. I get paid to make judgments on players, and you've got a right to your opinion, but I've also got a right to my opinion, you know, and that my opinion, obviously I keep the players I want to keep. Young Matt Holland, yeah, I think he may bounce back and maybe first division, and he's a decent player. And young Scotty Cannon's a decent player, don't get me wrong. I tell you now, you know, you can sit in front of all these people, I tell you without any shadow of a doubt, there will be no comparison with what Frank Lampard will achieve in football and what Scotty Cannon will achieve in football.
But you'll give him the opportunity.
I don't give him the opportunity. You know, there is no favouritism. In fact, I'm probably holding him back more. But I'm telling you now, and I may be now, I didn't want to say this in front of him, but he will go right to the very top. Right to the very top.
Well, there you are, you heard it here first.
And those words stuck with Frank. When Lampard ended his playing career, he had made the biggest impact in Chelsea history, making 429 appearances and scoring a record of 147 goals, as well as having 3 Premier League titles, a Champions League medal, and making 106 caps for England, in which he hit the back of the net 29 times. We saw Redknapp's choice to play a young Lampard warranted after all he achieved. But still, when the fans had their chance to speak, when there was no Twitter around at the time, Lampard saw backlash. But because he had the backing of the manager, he succeeded. After all, at the time it was only one person doubting Frank. It could have been more, but for all he knew, it was just that one person. When Lampard ended his career in 2017 at New York City, it felt like his involvement in the professional game wasn't over. He had more to give. And it turns out this was to follow in the footsteps of his uncle Harry, being a football manager. Being able to pass on that vast amount of knowledge and skill that he had amassed over his career, and just perhaps give someone a chance at the very top, just like his uncle Harry did for him 20 years prior. Lampard started his managing career at Derby County during the 2018-19 season. His first game in charge was a 2-1 away win at Reading in August 2018. Derby finished that season in 6th, having won 20 out of 46 games and drawn 14. It qualified the Rams for the playoffs, which wasn't bad going, but there was no improvement from the season before, where they had finished 6th then as well. It was far from a managerial masterclass, and the only difference being that Lampard had lost one more game than Rowett had the previous season. Among the Derby team Lampard managed saw his old pal Ashley Cole and opponents from the past like Tom Huddleston and David Nugent. But amongst the squad, we saw young Chelsea loanees in Fikayo Tomori and the man of the hour, Mason Mount. Mount joined on a season-long loan from Chelsea just a few weeks after the Blues legend joined the Rams himself. It certainly raised a few eyebrows at the time though. At just 19 years old, Mount hadn't made a senior appearance for Chelsea, and despite being player of the season at Vitesse, where he'd scored 14 goals in 32 games, he was unknown in England. Apart from inside the Chelsea camp, that is, Mount was a part of a team who won 2 FA Youth Cups, an Under-18 Premier League, and the UEFA Youth League, and that is where the comparisons between him and Lampard began. And that season he played in a very similar role to where Lampard himself would have played. But it worked, with him standing out from the crowd at 19 years old with 11 goals and 6 assists in 44 appearances. Despite a dip in form in front of goal in October and November that season, he finished with the highest expected goal production out of anyone in the team. His efforts didn't go unnoticed from Derby fans and teammates alike, with Tom Huddleston claiming that Mount could become an improved version of Lampard after such an impressive season with the Rams. His final moments for Derby saw him scoring a playoff semi-finals in a 4-2 win over Leeds United to see the Rams get to the playoff final against Villa in a fight for the Premier League spot. And when Mount was called up to the England senior squad in March that season, Lampard said those magical words which had been said to him 23 years prior. He made it clear that Mount gives a real energy off the ball, and his energy and desire to win the ball back is brilliant. When you talk about the talent he has everything to go right to the very top. He continued to say, "My aim is to send him back to Chelsea, and there you go, you're 1 or 2 steps closer to the first team at that point." And that's exactly what unfolded that following year. But what fans didn't expect was that Lampard would be joining him. As in July 2019, after Lampard failed to beat Villa in the playoff finals, and Maurizio Sarri left for Juve after winning the Europa League and securing a 3rd place finish in the Premier League in his only season at Stamford Bridge, this meant that Lampard would join the Blues as a full-time manager. A fairy tale appointment, one which seemed to follow in the Premier League theme of club legends joining their old clubs, with Ole Gunnar Solskjaer leading Man United to a 6th place finish that season before, and with Chelsea suffering a transfer ban that season coming after breaching FIFA regulations, which found them guilty of 29 incidences of breaching Article 19, which relates to the transfer of players under the age of 18. He had nothing to lose. It was like a free roll of the dice that season. No one expected anything. He probably would have welcomed a few signings, and instead he arrived just as club legend and ex-teammate Eden Hazard departed, sold to Real Madrid for £88.5 million, the lure of the Bernabeu finally proving too strong. At least Christian Pulisic was bought for £58 million just before from Borussia Dortmund, and he arrived to fill that creative void. Yet the 20-year-old American would need time to settle at the Bridge, with Pedro and Willian getting older and a young Hudson-Odoi recovering from an Achilles injury. And as for strikers, Olivier Giroud had rarely been consistent in the Premier League. Neither Sarri or Conte was convinced by Michy Batshuayi, and Tammy Abraham, scorer of 25 goals during his loan spell at Villa last season, was yet to be proven in the Premier League. So with the club under transformation and a transfer ban in action, Lampard did what no other Chelsea manager had done in the past 20 years. Play the youngsters, because what else did he have to lose? And admittedly, it didn't get off to a good start, losing 4-0 to Manchester United. But look at that lineup, consisting of young talent, a bit of Mason Mount in that pivotal cam position, and spearheaded by Tammy Abraham, but it did look a little bit disjointed. Despite this, with Lampard at the wheel, they got to work. And then the unimaginable happened. There was a global pandemic, yet no one expected that to happen. What a nutty year for football that was. But despite there being a massive break in the middle of the season, and the Euros, which should have taken place that summer, postponed to the following year, Lampard actually did alright, which is baffling really, considering how he's done in his second tenure and the team he had at the time. Somehow he secured Champions League, finishing 4th with 66 points, with a 1.74 points per game record. Results were alright despite everything going on in the world, but Lampard's tactics, if there were any, were all-out attack, scoring a lot but conceding a lot too. They scored 6 more than they did the previous season with Hazard, but they conceded 15 more than the season before. And on record, they had an XG tally of 76.23, which was actually good enough to rank second that season behind Man City's 102.21. That is not a typo right there. And ahead of the champions, Liverpool's 75.19, and their best tally beating the 2014-15 season. Aside from this, the vibes from the youngsters were immaculate. Tammy had held his own up front with 18 goals in all competitions, 15 in the Prem. Pandemic Pulisic was another level, everyone thinking he was the next Hazard. And Mason Mount became the star boy with 8 goals and 6 assists in all competitions. And saying this, Lampard had found his new main man, who started in 53 games that season, 37 in the Premier League, which was more than any other player that season, earning him the title of teacher's pet, or Lampard's son, as the Twitter bum boys like to say. Because no matter what the performance, Mason Mount was the first name on the team sheet, which of course led to fans talking. Of course they were. It doesn't take much for football Twitter to get their pitchforks out. Their main concern being Mount's less than consistent form. Lampard would continue to choose him in that high-pressing number 8 position. Was this something that Mason could deal with though? Regular talk online, often negative for a 21-year-old. Tough to take for anyone, never mind a footballer on the way up in the game. Football is so different nowadays, with relevant football players in the past seeing backlash through newspapers. But today, any player is able to see the discourse surrounding them online, whether it's them or their team, just by a tap of their fingers. These type of youngsters would never have had to see this criticism in the past, never mind on a daily basis. You could argue that Mount had benefited from the tough football upbringing at Chelsea, where competition was rife from the junior groups upwards, and with managers coming and going on a regular basis, you rarely graduate from the Chelsea academy into becoming a real first team regular in those surroundings without a real mental resilience to cope with the inevitable setbacks along the way. But the online hate, that's something they don't teach you how to deal with. As a child, Mason watched DVDs of George Best and Hadji, and he'd also studied Modric, Lampard, Xavi and Iniesta over the years when he was growing up around that time. His growing talent was never satisfied, and that was represented when a video came out of him when he was younger, scoring a free kick like CR7, using that knuckleball technique by hitting the valve. Everyone saw it, it went viral. It's the positive sides like that on socials which actually make you appreciate it, but this didn't happen all the time. Under Lampard in the Premier League that season, Mount was predominantly employed in that number 8 role. Sometimes he was tasked a little bit further back, but mainly in that role where Lampard would have played himself. But after a poor start to the 2021 season, and with Lampard leaving, new manager Thomas Tuchel continued to play Mount in his setup as more of a number 10 role, drifting between the midfield and the striker. And it certainly worked, with Mount going on to win the Champions League that season, pivotal in his high pressing free number 10 role, scoring more goals and getting more touches in the opposition box, which led to silverware. Mason's game seemed to suit Tuchel's high press style, with players like Kante also thriving in the 3-4-3 formation, and the Champions League trophy as a reward in that season was a clear reminder of this. During this time, there was no point where Mount showed signs of being too big for his boots, despite winning player of the season twice. Fans argued that this was because better players like Reece and Kante were too often injured, which is an unfair reason, but admittedly Mount's performances were average at best in the 21-22 season, but so were a lot of the Chelsea team. Personally, I think a lot of it was down to burnout, playing up to 70 games in the league, multiple club tournaments and the Euros in the summer. It was a weird period at the club, with Abramovich having to leave in the mid 2021-22 season because of the war in Ukraine, and with players giving less than convincing performances. A lot of the team were criticised, but Mount seemed to be a scapegoat for most, because he had been the face of that team for the last couple of seasons. He did have a banner at Stamford Bridge, for God's sake. If you like the look of this vintage Inter Milan jersey, then visit Mime Jerseys for affordable, fast delivery and a whole range of replica jerseys online. Make sure you use JackChat10 at checkout for a bonus. It was around the start of the 22-23 season that this all came to boil, when Tuchel was sacked by new owner Thomas Boehly after a bang average run of games. And this is where Chelsea Football Club hit a brick wall. With the appointment of Graham Potter and a multitude of injuries, including Mount, Chelsea proceeded to have the worst season in the Premier League in the past 29 years. And with Blues fans in meltdown all season, and opposition fans and pundits in complete disbelief as to how bad Chelsea were playing, despite Mount not even playing most of the season, his reputation still hadn't healed, and chose to leave Twitter mid that season, which likely meant that he had seen everything that was being said about him on a regular basis. And now was the time to leave, because after all, nothing stops football Twitter hate, not even Elon. Even if it was nothing to do with Mount even playing, he probably would have received some backlash. And this brings us to June 2023, when as of this week, True Blue Mason Mount is strongly linked with Manchester United, a direct Premier League rival. Reminiscent of two-time player of the season Juan Mata's move to Manchester United when Jose came in 2014, Mount is now strongly linked with a move up north. But unlike the discourse of 2014, where people questioned Mourinho's decision, Twitter seemed to be backing Mount's move, with the general hope that he fails at the club. And let's break that down. That's understandable for Chelsea fans to feel that way, because in their eyes, if Mount was a true blue, he wouldn't turn down a 200k contract. Or this is what reports suggest, that Mason Mount, 6 months prior to this, turned down a 200k a week contract, following a string of academy players like Reece James getting a new contract for 250k a week. Mount currently earns £85,000 a week, and has done since his breakthrough, an amount the same as players like Chelsea ghost Barbara Rahman. Seriously. And like new young centre-back Benoit Badiashile. And considering players like new striker David Fofana earns 200k a week, you can understand why the face of the club is a little bit annoyed. Unfortunately, the player who has a banner at Stamford Bridge looks like he will be exiting the door in the summer of 23. Much like many others, with the huge squad needing trimming. I believe if this had happened the summer before, this problem might not have arisen. But after that big spend in January, with plenty players coming in the door, and even more coming through, with a squad turnover needed when Poch comes in, unfortunately it's looking like it needs to be signed, sealed and delivered to create funds for Chelsea to get out of the pit that they're in at the moment. With this in mind, maybe he had made his mind up after he had slowly been phased out of the first team in the past year. But can you really blame him? The amount of shit he gets online, even when he's played at the top of the game, coming straight out of the academy and won the Champions League. It's ridiculous. It's amazing that the butterfly effect, which might have seen a once future captain of Chelsea become a red devil at the end of the day, could be seen as a direct result of Lampard favouring Mount all those years ago, which perhaps could have come down to Lampard seeing a little bit of him in Mason, which makes sense to be fair, giving him that chance to shine like Harry Redknapp did for him all that time ago. However, I suppose effects like this happen all throughout football, and you could say if Putin hadn't got so greedy and started that fucking war, things like that might have been different at Chelsea Football Club in 2023 anyway. Whether Mount leaves for United or not, he leaves behind him a Champions League campaign which only one legendary other group managed to achieve. So whether the haters like it or not, he's been a success at Chelsea. Chelsea fans will not like to see him achieve at United, and I kind of get that. I don't really want to see them achieve either, obviously, but this will obviously leave a sour taste in the mouth of most at Stamford Bridge, which could cause more backlash for the England international online than he ever would have wanted in the first place. However, it might be the best choice for his career, because it's clear, even with the success he's brought to Chelsea in a really bad time for the club in the past 5 years, especially with him being a Cobham graduate, he was still unable to win over the fan base. Everyone's human at the end of the day.